So we're going to talk today more about grief. And an interesting thing happened this week. Several interesting things have happened this week in regards to grief. First of all, a good friend of my son's, his family lost a pet. And I noticed that oftentimes there's varieties of opinions. If you're a pet lover and an animal lover, you totally get why people grieve over pets. But other people would probably look at that and say, it's an animal. Why are you grieving over an animal? What's the reason for that? And it's the same process. If this is some human or thing or living, breathing creature, it doesn't even have to be a living, breathing creature, though. We're going to talk about that too. But if these are things that you love and they mean something to you, you will grieve them. You will go through the 5 stages of Kubler-Ross's grief, and you will go through those things in your own way. Just like I talked about grief in my last video, it's the same. And if you haven't subscribed to my videos and they're interesting to you and you'd like to hear more about my thoughts on grief, on caregiving, on things of the social work nature, on organizing your life, getting your life together, please subscribe. I'm just starting out, but I think I got some stuff I could share that maybe would help some people. So that's all I want to do, is help people. That's what it's about, is giving it back, all the things I've learned in my life that I hopefully can help someone else either avoid those things or help them through those things. Another loss that people don't talk about very often is when you miscarry. Miscarriage is a huge loss that most people don't ever talk about. I've actually experienced that as well, and there's grief that goes through that, and there's a misunderstanding with that. There is even a form of grief that goes along when people choose to have an abortion. That's a totally different kind of grief, but it is a grief. It's a decision, and no matter what your political stance is or your personal beliefs are, psychologically there are things that you go through when that happens, when that's a choice that you make. So all of these things have grief. Now, one of the other things I wanted to mention too, and we'll talk about all these different topics in episodes to come, but one of the things, and you know, leave me a comment about what you think is the most interesting thing you would like to learn about grief. When I worked for a senior high-rise, it was an independent living facility for senior citizens. I did that for several years, and one of the things that we had there was a class on grieving for your furniture. Yeah, you heard me right. Grieving for your items, grieving for the things that wouldn't fit in your apartment. And I had never thought about that. But when you think of people who have lived 70, 80, 90 years, more than likely have had a spouse, have had a home, have had children, and think of what some of us keep for our kids. I've got like 3 tubs of things for my son who's turning 21. All kinds of stuff. And every time we look through it, he goes, why are you keeping this stuff? But for me, it's sentimental, and eventually I will purge it and it'll be gone. But right now, it's still sentimental to me. And so think about that. Think about furniture that you're not going to be able to take. Things that you bought with someone that you love. Think about your parents right now. Think about maybe someone that you know that's an older person, or yourself maybe even. What would you do if tomorrow you realized you had to get rid of great-grandma's chest, because chest or drawers or whatever furniture piece it was, because you just don't have room in your apartment and you got to move because you can't keep this big house and you're getting older and you need help, so you're going to a place where people can help you. So think about that. That's another grief. That's another grieving process. And I don't think a lot of people understand that. And I think specifically caregivers, younger caregivers that are helping their elderly parents or helping an elderly aunt or uncle, and they don't get, why are you so upset? So you got to get rid of some stuff. It's stuff. You know, it's just things. It's just materialistic. It's especially if you are someone that's in the minimalist process, which I think minimalism is a good thing for most people. But if you're of that mindset that less is more, and you're helping someone that isn't of that mindset, you got to kind of If you can, be patient with them, because these are big decisions about what am I going to get rid of, what am I going to keep. Maybe I'll put it in storage. I have worked with multiple families as an organizer who someone died or someone got older and they had to move, and the person did not want to get rid of their things. And so the family went out and got a storage unit and they stored all this stuff, and eventually the person passed, and then they're like, what do we do with it? And so they send me over and they go, okay, you tell us, like, can we sell it? Is it any good? Should we just trash it? Like, what do we need to do with these items? Can you donate them? All of those things, whatever you can give back. Can you upcycle it? What can be done with these things? Because they don't know, but they also don't understand why they paid for the storage unit for how many ever years they paid for it. And so that's something I want to talk about too, is that people grieve for items. They grieve for things. I went through multiple moves in my life, and I went through a divorce. And when I divorced, I had to get rid of a lot of things. And even to this day, I think about some of those things and think, man, I wish I had that sewing machine. That was a beautiful sewing machine. But I couldn't keep it, and there was no place to take it, and I didn't have a way of moving it. And so it just had to be left. And that's sad. But I didn't know then that I was grieving. I was grieving a sewing machine that had been given to me by someone I cared about, and now I had to leave it in an apartment because I had no other choice to move on to another place, So we're going to talk about all those things, but that's just some food for thought. It's also some ideas about what might be something you would want to discuss. Grief about a pet, even unusual pets that other people wouldn't understand. Snakes. People grieve for snakes, they grieve for lizards. Or helping your children grieve for a pet. That's a really touchy subject too. What do you say to a child when they've lost a pet? What do you say to someone that's younger that's losing a person? We lost a very close friend of our family's. My son called her aunt when he was 6. And my nephew, who was very close to this woman also, decided to take my son, asked if he could take my son to the funeral. And it was an open casket, and we talked with my son, who was very mature for his little 6-year-old age, and asked if he'd like to see his auntie, not true auntie, but auntie in heart, and he said yes. And just recently, he'll be turning 21 soon, and I asked him, I said, do you think that affected you? Like, do you think I shouldn't have done that? Was that a bad decision? He says, no. He says, it was a wonderful decision because I got to say goodbye. And so for him, that was a good choice. Other children, that may not be it. They may be more sensitive. They may be more fragile, and that wouldn't be the way to handle that. So we'll talk about that. But anything you're interested in the topic of grief, specifically right now, because I'm doing this series on grief, just let me know and give me a comment, and we'll look into it. So this is Ronnie, and wherever you're at today in your process, and whoever you're trying to send these videos to help, just blessings to everyone, and have a great day.